Scafflogic introduces you to a world of logic. Hello and welcome to this training session. In today's demonstration, I will show you how to change lifts and select verticals in the scaffold. In this video, I will be using NHAC. If you have a different scaffold brand, you may notice that my measurements are different. For those who do not know, the NHAC scaffold is what we refer to as a heavy steel scaffold and is used in Scandinavia for bricklaying. It is also the same type as Hacky Universal. To accomplish our task, we must first go into Properties, and once the properties are displayed, we will tell the system we want top lifted, because when we do this, the bricklayer function automatically becomes available. We will check that and go to Options. In Options, we can select how close we want our lifts together. And under European rules, we must not exceed the maximum of 100 centimeters between the lifts. Let's finish our selections and say OK, and proceed to build our scaffold. As you can see, the system has automatically built up the transoms and ledgers with 100 centimeters between them, so you have the possibility to move the deck up for brickwork as you are making the wall. One of the nice features here is that the inside verticals are only made out of 100 centimeter verticals, and that means that the scaffold can be erected the whole way up, like so. I will try to illustrate by showing how to erect the scaffold from the ground up. You can see that as we build it up, it seems very logical that you can work on the scaffold and still have outside protection for the brickworks. This is how we do brickwork very quickly, and you can be sure that this is a very solid scaffold. This special feature is only used in Scandinavia.